said, the buyer rang the competitor slashed their price in half. I tried to turn it around, I couldn't. I was like, oh shit. And after a moment he said, but I've offered to help them anyway. He said, they've got some really big goals around their people strategy, and I think there's a lot of people in our team that could offer a lot of value. And you know what? I was so proud of him, because whilst he lost the deal for the product that day, he absolutely won the relationship. And 12 months later, what happened? We won the contract. And I shared that story with our whole company, recognising George's behaviours, because it's the behaviour that ends up driving the result. And the thing is, we're so numbers driven, we're so data driven in sales, it can be so easy to fall into the trap of recognition by numbers and miss out on all of the things that are going on every day to try and get us there. If you think there's more work you can do on recognising behaviour in your team, then your values, whether you've got sales values or company values, they will be your best friend. If you're like many of the sales leaders I speak to that have them, but they're not necessarily alive in your team, there's two things you can do tomorrow to bring them to life. Number one, make sure people understand them. And that's really easy. That's get people in a room, whiteboard them up, and have a conversation about what does it mean to be living these values? What do they look like in action? And the second thing is to wrap something around them. So when we launched our values at Jiminny, we launched them with Thankful Friday. So there is a moment each week where we're intentional about recognising the behaviour of those that are driving the success of the business. So that's number one, recognise behaviour as well as results. Number two, allowing for freedom and autonomy in the sales process. So one of the biggest mistakes that I have made and I have witnessed has been chaining sales reps to an overprescribed sales process. Because if I can just, I crave the machine, right? I crave the predictable machine. So if I can just prescribe every step, every activity from lead to sale, I can minimise all the risk of a salesperson getting it wrong along the way. But what I learned is as you shrink the risk, you also shrink the rep's ability to connect with the buyer and to use their best judgment and to come up with new ideas, which I later learned is where all the magic is. Because on the other side of the machine is a human who's buying through feeling and emotion. When I took on this role as Group Sales Director at RG, the UK sales team had been failing quarter on quarter for 18 months. And it was largely because they were living in this overprescribed, overstructured sales process. So to turn it around, we redesigned it. In fact, we renamed it the buyer's process. And sales activities became a list of best practice rather than a checklist. And deal progression was centred around buyer behaviour. What does the buyer need to believe, think, feel and see? And how can we move them through their decision? And this new way of thinking, it just created this freedom for reps to use their best judgment, to come up with new ideas and to better connect with the buyer, ultimately because they were better connected to themselves. And I'm going to finish on hiring for passion. So when we made these changes to the sales process or the buying process, all of a sudden I was like, oh my God, there's all this room for creativity in the way we sell now. We need to get really good at hiring creative sellers. And so I did the usual, Google interview questions for creative sellers, which didn't kick much back. But 2 months later, one of my sales reps resigns. And he says to me, Shell, sales isn't right for me. It's not creative enough. I was like, bloody hell, I've just made all these changes and never been more creative. How could you say that? I just didn't understand. And later on, I realised what he was really saying was, Shell, sales isn't right for me, so I can't be creative. You see, there's a ton of research that shows if we're going to be creative in our work, we've got to be intrinsically motivated by the challenge of the work itself. And he wasn't. He wasn't a sales guy. I was never going to bring out the best of him. So I stopped worrying about hiring for creativity, and I just started worrying about hiring people that bloody love their job, that were really passionate about sales. How bleeding obvious is that? In fact, love your job was one of our values, and I just started to pay a lot more attention to that in our interview process. And there were two really simple questions that were quite telling. The first was, tell me about how you develop yourself. This is not a what's your favourite book kind of thing. This is like, I want to know the what's, where's, why's, how's. Like, what do you do to make yourself better? And I wanted to feel that passion for it. And the second was, tell me why you want this job. 8 times out of 10, people would tell me why they wanted to work for the company. But the ones that really got it would tell me why they wanted to develop themselves as a sales professional within the company. And they were the ones I wanted to work with. The guy in the story, he's now a teacher. Very happy, bringing all sorts of creativity to the wonderful world of teaching, I'm sure. So they're my 3 things. Recognise behaviour as well as results. Make sure you've got freedom in your sales process. And finally, hire people that bloody love it. Thank you very much for listening.